Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome to this series we're doing that's sort of like a dictionary series of all things narcissistic. A lot of these terms are thrown around, but not everyone exactly knows what they mean. My goal for this series is that you understand these terms inside and out and maybe have a better understanding of why they happen and how they're affecting you. Today, our video is going to take on the issue of hoovering. But before we go on to that intriguing topic, please make sure you hit the bell and subscribe, because not only will you get daily notifications about this series, but you'll also get notifications about all the videos that I put out and that also YouTube Lives and a bunch of other things that help clarify your understanding of narcissism. So let's then start with this idea of hoovering. In case you don't know, a hoover is actually a slang for a vacuum cleaner in different parts of the world. So to hoover is to vacuum, just to give you that backstory. So have you ever been in a narcissistic relationship and finally find the gumption to send them packing to just sort of end the relationship? Or maybe you're in a narcissistic relationship and they discarded you. Perhaps it's a family relationship and you finally had the big showdown with your narcissistic parent or your narcissistic adult child, and you finally lay down the law, and perhaps you even go no contact. This could even happen with a narcissistic friend. If you have done that, then you know what can often happen. They try to suck you back in like a vacuum cleaner, and that is where the term hoovering comes from. Hoovering is a term used to describe how a narcissist may try to suck you back into a relationship, whether or not you left them or they left you. It works in part because they use the techniques they already have in their wheelhouse, things like charm, charisma, confidence, or alternately, they will use their own sense of victimization and how hard their life is to play upon your guilt, or they do both. But by the time hoovering happens, they also have some definite advantages in terms of sucking you back in. After you being and experiencing the utter confusion of a narcissistic relationship, good days, bad days, gaslighting, lies, and guilt, many people want to believe that the narcissist has finally come around, has really finally made the changes. It can be very powerful to believe that your words got through to the narcissist. So let's say that you are in a relationship with a narcissist that got uglier and uglier, and finally you decide to, I'm out, and you even go no contact. As part of that entire deterioration of your relationship, you kept telling the narcissist the things that they're doing wrong, the things that you need, and you explained, and you defended, and you did all the things I tell you not to do. And not surprisingly, they didn't listen to a word you said. So you had it, and you decide, I'm out of here, I'm leaving, I'm going no contact. But you put an end to the relationship because you actually finally saw that they won't change. Good for you. But then one day, they come back with the words you desperately wanted to hear. They say, you were right. I didn't treat you well. Angels could not sing more beautiful words. You wanted to hear those words for months or even years. And here it is. The smart part of you knows to doubt it. But after that time away from the narcissist, and after a little time under your wheels, and you get that euphoric recall, and you come back, and you even might be feeling a little bit confident, you may even want to believe them because you forget all the bad stuff. And that's when the hoovering begins. In this form of hoovering, in something I call love bomb hoovering, the narcissist sucks you back in like they did in the first place. They tell you what you want to hear. And this time, they know exactly what you want to hear because it was exactly the reason you left. You did tell them. You did show them. But the same old red flags are there. However, now you're feeling a little smug. Like now you're finally enough. By the way, you were always enough. But now in their eyes, you're enough and you're worthy of being heard by them. You may now start love bomb phase 2 with them, or phase 3, or phase 4, and they're going to start all the usual love bombing stuff they did the first time. Maybe a vacation, maybe makeup sex. You almost feel like you're dating again, but the red flags are still there. And before you can say gaslight, boom, you are back in it with the same old invalidating patterns, except that this time you feel more foolish. But there are also other forms of hoovering. There's also something that I term guilt hoovering. Despite how badly narcissists treat you, part of the reason that many people stay in these relationships so long is because of guilt. They'll say things like, oh, I guess he did kind of try, and she was going through a lot, and she was going through a tough time, and he did take me on vacation, and she's really insecure, and she doesn't really mean the things she says, and gosh, we had so much fun going to the movies. The vulnerable and covert narcissist is able to weaponize their sense of victimization and play upon that guilt of yours. So even when you have hit your wall with them and you finally leave, they will play on that guilt, letting you know that it was so difficult for them since you left, that they cannot find someone like you, that they don't always know that they know that they always don't get it right, but they were always so grateful when you would give them a second chance. And you almost feel like a little mini martyr, like, oh, I guess I did. I guess I am a good person. I gave them a second chance. Guilt hoovering can prey upon your need to be a rescuer, your need to be a nice person, or even, again, that personal martyr complex you may have inherited from your family of origin. Empaths in particular are very vulnerable to the guilt hoovering dynamic. It may have been literally a superhuman effort for you to pull yourself out of that relationship. And after you did, you were plagued by guilt. So when the covert or even the overt narcissist tries to pull you back in, he or she can masterfully play upon your guilt. And before you know it, you are right back in it, listening to their angry, sullen, resentful, and victimized rants. It's obviously not as slick as love bombing when a narcissist pulls you back in with guilt hoovering, but as a hoovering strategy, it works like a charm. Again, especially for people who tend to be very empathic. Hoovering can be particularly intense if they find out you had been dating someone else. Narcissists do not like the idea that someone could replace them. They have no problem replacing you, by the way. But if they hear about you dating someone else, the hoovering may come fast and furious. In fact, many people have told me that they found it somewhat validating or exciting when the narcissist heavily hoovers them after they learned that you're dating someone else. It plays into some unhealthy need to have people kind of have a duel over you like the olden days, but sadly, if you fall for it, you're going to slide right back into the toxic pattern with the narcissist. And you even have to ask yourself, was I dating that new person to kind of get hoovered back by my narcissist? Hoovering works for a few reasons. The first reason is hope. I have said it 1,000 times and I'll say it 1,000 more. Narcissistic relationships are often kept in place by hope. The hope that it will get better. The hope that the idea that it'll get better can really be a fantasy that keeps these relationships going. Hoovering plays on that hope because the person is now doing many of the things you wanted them to do during the hoovering phase. They might actually pay attention for a little while. They might listen. They might even try to correct some of their past errors. It is more seductive than a seduction. But the second reason that hoovering works is fear. Another reason that people stay in narcissistic relationships, probably in fact the biggest, is fear. Fear keeps people in these narcissistic relationships because people are afraid of being alone. They are afraid of the unfamiliar. They are afraid of trying to make it on their own. They're afraid of the guilt they will feel if they leave. And hoovering can play on all of that fear. After a break from the narcissist, even when your life starts feeling better, and you start feeling better, and you feel relieved and you feel more free, there are still those old fears. Maybe you try to date and you're finding that it's hard to meet new people. Maybe you're having trouble making ends meet. Maybe you're just lonely and feel like even a mean person to watch TV with is still a person to watch TV with. So when they start to hoover, those fears of being alone can really get allayed. Now you're not as afraid of that, and you want to hope that their intentions are good. That darn hope is raising its head again. And then your fear of being alone can just evaporate if you go with the hoovering. This relates again back to that third reason of guilt, that some narcissists can be just pathetic enough and victimized, as we said, talked about before, and the fear of feeling guilty means that the hoovering works, because then not only do you get to try again in a relationship, but more importantly, now you don't need to deal with that icky, guilty feeling, which is very uncomfortable for many people to feel guilty. A fourth reason that hoovering works is that you still hear the old stories in your head, the rationalizations that you made for their behavior, the importance of selling everyone on your whole happy family scenario, if this is someone you're married to or the family you came from, the image that you wanted to put to the world. Whatever it is, those narratives and second chances were powerful enough to often keep you in the relationship for longer than you should have. So it's not surprising that even when you got tough and you got out, that there is enough of that stuff hanging out there to make you vulnerable to hoovering. The concept of hoovering makes a lot of sense in romantic relationships, right? Because you break up, they try to suck you back in. It doesn't always feel like it makes as much sense in other narcissistic relationships, like workplace or family relationship, but it absolutely does. And for those of you in those kinds of narcissistic relationships, family or work, you've probably already seen it. Let's say you put up a boundary with a toxic or narcissistic parent. You know that there are many ways that that parent may try to draw you back in. A family event, a family illness, discussions around probate or other financial or legal matters, a concern about a more beloved family member like a grandmother or an aunt. Family hoovering is actually very powerful, and it may not just be a parent. It may be a sibling who tries to hoover you back. The tough part of families and parents is that as time goes on, the relationships have new needs, and for many people, it can get very hard to keep their boundaries when, for example, an older parent gets sick, or when there is a major family event you want to attend and will, need to be present at that because you care about the other people involved. For people from narcissistic families, the grief of missing out on a healthy family system can take a lifelong toll. And the childlike hope and dream of having loving and normal parents can be a very powerful tool. So if a parent hoovers you back in, it can be very compelling. It can also be possible that this happens when there's a real family crisis, such as an illness or a death. At that time, you obviously can be involved with your family as you need, but you can also maintain your boundaries. You may recognize that your mother will never change, but you may need to interact with her to ensure that your other parent or a grandparent or someone else in the family gets adequate medical care. You can keep your boundaries and still be able to circumvent the hoovering process. And of course, when it comes to family hoovering, families are masterful at using guilt-based hoovering. They may play upon survivor guilt. Oh, so now you're too good to spend time with us, or just good old-fashioned guilt. How can you abandon your family? What kind of person does that? Or, oh, you have time and money. Now you have more of that than any of us. It sure is sad that you don't share it with all of us, the people who sacrifice so much for you. Anyone from a narcissistic family system knows the lengths to which narcissistic parents and extended family will go to pull you back in, and how hard it can be to resist it, especially if it plays on your existing guilt. But just as with all hoovering, with family hoovering, once they suck you back in, not surprisingly, they go right back to their old patterns. And this can often be more devastating than even traditional close relationship hoovering because it plays on lifelong guilt, lifelong passive-aggressive patterns you've observed in your family. And it may become even more complex if the family system was not just characterized by narcissism, but also other forms of trauma and abuse. The child part of you always gave your parents a second chance, and that part of you may be at play again here. So it can be quite devastating to get pulled back in and have it all go back to the way that it always was. You may literally experience that childlike sense of grief and loss and helplessness and powerlessness that nothing you can do will make it better. So that begs the question, why do narcissists hoover? Well, there's multiple reasons. As noted above, narcissists don't like being rejected. And if you do set boundaries, or you leave them, or you go no contact, they not only don't like the rejection, they hate the idea that they didn't win. So hoovering can be part of their need to win and feel confident that they can get you back. Many times, if their hoovering actually works, they're relieved that they won, and then they'll pretty quickly discard you. It's all about the win. Not that they want to keep you around, they want to just think that they can suck you back in. And another reason that they hoover is control. Control and being controlling are key dynamics in narcissism and narcissistic abuse. Again, just like their need to always win, they also don't like losing control. And if you are stepping away from the relationship or leaving, or frankly, even when they leave you, the idea that they can no longer control you does not work for them. So hoovering not only serves the role of sucking you back in so they can control you, but to feel the sense of control of simply being able to suck you back in. Hoovering also feeds that entire addictive dynamic of narcissistic relationships. It's a part of all of them. If you are a survivor or a victim of one of these relationships, then you know that your sense of being addicted to the narcissist makes you vulnerable to the hoovering and the entire dynamic of hoovering. But for the narcissist, their addiction to the cycle of highs and lows in the relationship absolutely feeds their addiction cycle in this relationship too. Narcissists actually do not do well in relationships that are stable and steady and free of drama. The approach and the avoidance and the ups and the downs are kind of almost a draw for them. And often it's sadly the only thing that keeps them engaged. The drama kind of keeps them hooked in. And narcissists also hoover when they are running out of narcissistic supply. It may simply be that other people don't want to put up with their BS. And so if you were a steady and consistent source of supply for them in the past, they may come sniffing around again. Hoovering is very much a part of the cycle of the narcissistic relationship and frankly of almost all abusive relationships. The way it sort of plays out is tension, abuse, honeymoon. The honeymoon period is the hoovering and also plays on the almost addictive cycle of these relationships. The high you get from the ups and downs, the hoovering is the part that comes after the downs. So it's very, very, very seductive and very compelling. But the fact is these cycles are not healthy. And as seductive as hoovering can be in some cases, it is also very unhealthy. You know, lest I forget, I also want to say a few words about workplace hoovering, because it does happen. It's a bit more of a rare dynamic. But it may be that you work in a place where you actually recognize that your value isn't being recognized. You start to realize other people make more, they have different responsibilities or better responsibilities or just better. And so one day you say, I'm out of here. But it may very well be, as often happens in narcissistic workplaces or with narcissistic bosses, they may need you, but they'd never admit to that. But if you do step away, you may have an interesting experience where they try to hoover you back in. They may offer you more money or the responsibilities or perks that you wanted. But what ends up happening is you may get those things, but then you'll go back to being treated the same way, just making a few more bucks an hour. You really have to ask yourself if that's worth it. And because the narcissistic boss or supervisor or leader is a narcissist in other areas of their lives, they also hate that idea of not being in control. For example, narcissistic bosses don't do well with having employees that work from home. They need to control them. They need to monitor them. So if you are looking for that kind of workplace setup, and it's sort of the standard for your particular kind of industry that can be done, it's the narcissistic bosses that often will not allow that. They may try to hoover you in and say, sure, you can do that, but within a few weeks and months may use techniques like guilt and shame to pull you back into the workplace. So please put aside the fantasies and pay attention to this dynamic of hoovering, because if you don't understand it, you can easily get caught in a cycle that feels impossible to break. And trust me, you do not want to get sucked back in. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, please hit the bell, please subscribe, because this series is coming out in multiple parts. We put up a new episode every day. You'll get notifications about that, as well as about all of the other content on narcissism you can find on my channel. Thanks again. My channel. Thanks again. My channel. Thanks again.